In this video we are going to talk about top 10 most shocking moments in history. But before we continue, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for further updates. History is full of events, from the Salem witch trials to the bombing of Hiroshima, that shocked the globe and continue to amaze people decades and centuries later. The BBC's oral history radio and television show Witness presents the tale of these pivotal events using eyewitness evidence, letters, diaries, and archive interviews. Here are 10 of the more shocking examples. Number 10. The execution of Anne Boleyn. The first English queen to be publicly executed was Anne Boleyn, who was Henry VIII's second wife, on the morning of May 19, 1536. Anne was executed on a scaffold built on Tower Green, inside the walls of the Tower of London, after being accused of adultery, incest, and planning the death of the monarch. According to historian Suzannah Lipscomb, we are so accustomed to her death that it is difficult to understand how shocking it would have been. Little more than 3 years had passed since Anne and Henry's wedding when she passed away. Henry had parted with the Catholic Church and his wife of nearly 24 years, the mother of his child, the future Mary I, for her. But by the spring of 1536, Henry's devotion had diminished and he was actively courting Jane Seymour, Anne's lady-in-waiting. Beginning in the first week of May 1536, Anne was detained and held in the Tower of London together with 5 courtiers, including her brother George. While Anne and her brother were found guilty of high treason, Mark Smeaton, William Brereton, Francis Weston, and Henry Norris were found guilty of adultery with the Queen, as well as of conspiring to kill the King. By May 19, all 6 defendants had met their deaths. No one ever displayed more fortitude or greater preparedness to meet death than she did, according to Eustace Chapuis, the Spanish envoy to Henry's court, who reported on Anne's execution in 1536. Nearly 500 years after Anne was put to death, historians are still divided over why she had to die. This episode of Witness looks into Anne's final moments and the circumstances surrounding her execution. Number 9. The building of the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall divided Germany's communist East from its pro-US West for over 30 years. The wall was built by the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, during the course of one night on August 12 to 13, 1961, with the stated intention of preventing Western fascists from entering East Germany and undermining the establishment of a socialist state. In actuality, though, it helped to stop widespread East to West emigration. On August 13, Berliners awoke to discover that they were cut off from their friends, family, co-workers, and in some cases even their houses because it was now impossible to go from east to west. The temporary wall was quickly replaced with a reinforced concrete wall that was 12 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and lined with booby traps. Attempts to climb over, under, or around the Berlin Wall, which was in place until November 9, 1989, resulted in at least 171 fatalities in all. Number 8. The sinking of the Titanic. The apparently unsinkable RMS Titanic ran aground and sank on her first voyage on the night of April 14, 1912. Only 712 of the 2,208 passengers on board the ship, which was the biggest boat in the world at the time, survived. The massive ship sank in just 2.5 hours, and many individuals are thought to have perished minutes after hitting the sea due to the extremely cold conditions. The scale of the destruction was not understood until many days later, when the Daily Mail broke the news of the tragedy on April 16. The headline read, "Titanic sunk. No one perished." According to Dr. Aidan McMichael, a Titanic expert, the catastrophe was initially met with shock and astonishment, followed by tremendous sorrow at the enormity of the loss of life. How did a vessel that was declared unsinkable by the media end so tragically? Number 7. The Great Fire of London. The Great Fire of London, which burned down more than 65,000 dwellings and 13,000 structures including the Royal Exchange and the Old St. Paul's Cathedral, will be commemorated in September for the 350th time. The King's baker, Thomas Farrinor, lived in Pudding Lane, close to London Bridge, where the fire started early on Sunday, September 2, 1666. The fire raged for 3 days, fueled by a strong easterly wind and the dry, dusty air, by which time 100,000 people had lost their homes. Although the official death toll from the fire was only a small number, the actual number was probably significantly higher. The first-person accounts of diarist Samuel Pepys and young William Taswell, a student who witnessed the city burn to the ground, are combined in this episode of Witness. Muriel Jeter, a specialist from the Museum of London, also speaks to us. Number 6. The first man in space. The first human to travel into space was Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, who completed a 108-minute orbital voyage in his Vostok 1 spacecraft on April 12, 1961. The 27-year-old Gagarin launched with the command Poyekali. Let's go, wearing an orange spacesuit and a helmet with the letters CCCP painted in red to identify him as a Soviet citizen after he was ejected from the spaceship and parachuted to safety. When we look at the response of the Muscovites, where everyone was in the streets, on the roofs of buildings, and in the windows, I would compare this celebration with the May 9th Victory Day, the end of the Second World War for the Soviet Union. Sergei Khrushchev, the son of Nikita Khrushchev, who was the Soviet premier at the time of Gagarin's flight, told BBC News in 2010. This episode of Witness focuses on the young cosmonaut's meteoric rise to fame around the world and his role as the face of Soviet scientific innovation. Number 5. The Salem Witches. In the small religious community of Salem, Massachusetts, in northeastern America, 19 men and women were found guilty of witchcraft and hanged between June and September 1692. The Salem witch trials, a nightmare that rocked the entire world, have inspired hundreds of plays, movies, books, research papers, and dramas, notably Arthur Miller's celebrated 1953 work The Crucible. The false testimony of a group of young village girls who claimed to have been bewitched was used to convict the executed men and women. Continual family disputes and Native American assaults fueled paranoia, which quickly turned into a wave of panic and spread throughout colonial Massachusetts. In the spring of 1692, another 150 men, women, and children were implicated. They were only saved from the stake by confessing. Number 4. The outbreak of the First World War. The First World War, fought by more than 30 countries on a previously unheard-of geographical scale, was maybe the first genuinely global battle. More than 9 million soldiers and an undetermined number of civilians lost their lives in it, and according to the Imperial War Museum, it forever transformed the world's social and political landscape. Followed weeks of unrest following the murder of Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, at Sarajevo on June 28. Britain declared war on Germany on August 4, 1914. Over the ensuing months, as Europe fell into war, it became evident the war would not be won by Christmas. In this episode of Witness, the beginning of a conflict that would decimate an entire generation is depicted via archive recordings of eyewitnesses from Germany, France, Britain, and Belgium. Number 3. Jack the Ripper. A serial killer known as Jack the Ripper murdered and dismembered 5 prostitutes in London's East End in a matter of weeks in 1888. The city was in a state of panic as authorities searched for the murderer and rumors about his or her identity abounded. Was Jack a butcher, a doctor, a Jew, a foreigner, or a Jew? Jack was Jill, wasn't he? One idea even connected Prince Albert Victor, the grandson of Queen Victoria, to the deaths. However, despite questioning a large number of suspects, no one was found guilty of the killings, and the killer's identity is still unknown to this day. Number 2. Tutankhamun's tomb. The tomb of Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun from the 18th dynasty was discovered complete in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter and his colleagues, making it arguably the greatest archaeological find of all time. The Valley of the King's lone pharaonic tomb that hasn't been looted was discovered there, and it was packed with statues and other artifacts, so many of them, in fact, that it took 10 years to catalog them all. According to art critic Alastair Sooke, the 1922 discovery triggered a worldwide obsession with ancient Egypt. The West was shaken by a passion for Egyptian exoticism that permeated both high and low culture in the areas of music, fine art, fashion, film, and furniture design. As a result of his speeches regarding his discoveries in 1924, Carter rose to international fame. Number 1. The bombing of Hiroshima. Around 135,000 people were killed when the United States launched a nuclear bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. Expert Stephen Walker claims that thousands of people were burned alive within the first 3 seconds as a result of the burst point's temperature reaching 60 million degrees centigrade, 10,000 times hotter than the surface of the sun. 3 days after the strike, a second atomic bomb was detonated on Nagasaki, killing at least 50,000 people and possibly as many as 74,000, according to some estimates. Radiation sickness symptoms include vomiting, fever, exhaustion, gum bleeding, thinning hair, diarrhea, and, in the worst circumstances, death. Many survivors had these symptoms. Which of the facts shocked you the most? Do let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.